Hello, I'm Georgia Shakti-Hill, and I want to welcome you to Living in Balance. If you can accept that success is a self-fulfilling prophecy, then we're going to share with you 8 keys to greatness. Come join us. Gene Landrum is a fascinating man. His background is so interesting, and I bet you have heard of him. I'm going to introduce him as an author today, but he is an entrepreneur, and I want to welcome you. And one of your keys to fame was that you started Chuck E. Cheese.
Well, I created it. I took it out. I was the first president, and it's one of the things that I guess I am noted for.
And Silicon Valley is where you hung out.
That's right. I was there for 20 years, and it really, Georgia was the genesis. People ask me, why do you write books? You couldn't spell them, a few years ago. And it's really the genesis because I got out of graduate school, and what you learn in the MBA programs is that the world is quantitative, you model everything, and I got out there and worked with some of the real movers and shakers of the world. As you know, Silicon Valley is the epicenter of creativity and innovation. And I found the people there that were, and I worked with a guy who invented video games, and he was my boss, and I saw they were operating just the opposite of what I was told. And they were actually very qualitative. They had the vision, but the ability to quantify that vision.
Now, you are a prolific author. The one we're going to talk about today is 8 Keys to Greatness. But you have been writing about success and what are those qualities and characteristics of successful people. And it started with your dissertation for your PhD?
Yes, I did my dissertation on the innovator personality. I wanted to see if what I had found in Silicon Valley was pervasive in the Bill Gateses and the Ted Turners and the Bill Lears and people of that ilk, and sure enough, I found it was really amazing. It was almost shocking.
Well, and it's fascinating. The book was excellent to read. I mean, I really loved the approach. It was one of the longest introductions because you said everything I needed to know, I thought, in the introduction. You went through all the reasons that people are successful and the commonalities and the characteristics and so many examples. But then you went step by step, chapter by chapter. And so we're going to start with charisma because that is, it is something that is that qualitative?
Oh, absolutely. And Georgia, and you're the personification of that. Think of anybody.
You're a smooth talker.
Well, think of anyone you see running any organization, no matter what. They have a tremendous ability to communicate effectively, both through the written and spoken word. Yeah. And it's what I saw in Silicon Valley. They really have, they almost have the charm of an evangelist. And the examples I use, and I use one negative one, which is Hitler in my book, he took over a nation he wasn't even a citizen of through the spoken word. And he was a loser. He had never had a job. How do you take over a nation of significance like Germany when you through the spoken word?
Charisma.
And then, of course, charisma. And, of course, you have been enamored with some of the interesting people, Tesla and Isadora Duncan, the mother of modern dance, and Campbell. Think of the 3 of them. Talk about charismatic.
Well,
they could just bring people to tears.
I just picked out 3 because you mentioned so many. I mean, you go through this entire list, and some of your books have been devoted to specific areas. The men who were successful, women who were successful, blacks who were successful, but still what you keep finding is that greatness, there is a line that runs across it.
There is a common, and that's the thread, and that's what this book is, the culmination of that. These 8 keys that I have found pretty pervasive across, I don't care if you're a scientist, a teacher like Montessori, who's in the book, if you're a politician like Margaret Thatcher, if you are an entertainer like Madonna, and I take a lot of gaff from Madonna being here, calling her a genius, although she does have a 140 IQ. And I've just found it across all disciplines.
Now, you chose people who were successful on their own. They didn't marry into it. They were not born into it. So that was part of your criteria.
My criteria is they had to have done something unique and gotten to the very top, the pinnacle of their given discipline, Dr. Seuss. I mean, the pinnacle of children's books. And they had to stay there for 10 years. They had to have done it on their own and had some kind of an international influence.
Okay.
That's the criteria.
And they didn't have to be good necessarily, like Hitler, but he did impact the world.
Oh, he changed the world.
Absolutely.
That's right. I'm not writing about goodness, badness per se. Is how do you get to the very top and succeed? And he's a negative example of that you can do that. And to some degree, Napoleon, although he wasn't probably quite as bad as Hitler, but Napoleon, the same thing. He was very Machiavellian, as well as an artist like Picasso, who changed the world of art, right? He was not a nice guy.
I really appreciated what you wrote about Picasso because I understood his art better after having read what you wrote about him.
Oh, thank you. You know what I found really interesting, Georgia? You'll find this. You know, most of the people have this philosophic view of the world. They see the big picture, they see the forest, not the trees, one of the elements I talk about extensively. But Picasso, I found it really interesting. At 50, he wrote his epitaph. You know what he said? Blew me away. He said, "Here lies a great philosopher," how he saw himself, "and a poet, and sometimes painter." Blew me away. That's how he saw himself. More poetic and philosophic than an artist. Quite interesting.
Now, another one of the keys is competitiveness.
Correct.
Now, that's an interesting quality because I'm not comfortable in competition in some ways because it leaves a loser. If you're winning, somebody's losing.
Exactly, and that's a zero-sum game. But and I've now changed. I'm writing a new book called Passion and Performance.
Yes.
And in competition and passion is a very, it's very similar. And I use Michael Jordan and Babe Didriksen's The Harriest is the classic examples of the ultimate competitive personality type. And I guess the passion, the example I use is that, talent doesn't get you there. See, when I was very young, I thought you just, you got talent or you don't. Those people in the big, living in the house in the big hill. It takes some of these other qualities, and passion is one of them. Because without passion, well, let's use Madonna. Madonna, I was signing books with Steve Allen. Brilliant man, written 50 books, thousands of songs, just a genius. And I was signing books with him in LA. And he asked me to sign one for Jane Meadows. I'm signing the book for Jane. And Steve looks down and sees Madonna's picture next to the name Genius. He went ballistic. Landrum, are you nuts? I'm trying to get this slut thrown out of this town. Here you are writing a book calling her a genius. And you know what I told him, Georgia? And it's really describes this very well. She's a mediocre dancer, a mediocre singer, voted the world's worst actress in 1993. She has $200 million.
She has done something right.
She has done, exactly. And it wasn't talent, right? What was it? She's got passion.
Passion. I would say that's what I find. The people that I interview who really have connected with their purpose on the planet, they have a passion to share it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that I love that.
Exactly.
That works.
No question.
Now, the other thing that I like too, and this is where educators have come to, parents have come to, confidence and self-esteem. And that you put as a quality and one of the keys to greatness.
Oh, it's my third one, the confidence, self-esteem. I use Frank Lloyd Wright as an example of this, and a few other people. But when you believe, I mean, think of David Koresh and Jim Jones, and people will follow you to their death if you believe. People are looking for people who believe. You must believe. And these great people I found pervasive, every one of them. They had such, let me tell you an example of that I love about Frank Lloyd Wright. You know, he had an aphorism. He says, when I was young, I had to choose between hypocritical humility and honest arrogance. I chose arrogance.
Choose arrogance.
And he was on the stand testifying one day, and he called himself a genius. Walking out of the courtroom, reporter stopped him. Said, "Mr. Wright, how could you have the audacity to call yourself a genius?" Without hesitating, Wright looked at the reporter and said, "I was under oath." Here's a guy who believes, right?
Now, one of the questions that you answer, and that's why the book is so good for somebody to read and to share perhaps with their children, born or bred? Is it nature or nurture? And you talk about a success imprint versus a failure imprint. So you can create success in another person, in a child, with the self-esteem and so forth.
I am so convinced of this after all my research. Georgia. I talk extensively about these success imprints, and I have many of them that I use as an example of, let's use Napoleon. Napoleon was not French. He was Italian,
right,
from Corsica. He graduated 45th out of 54 in the École Militaire Academy. So he was a very average, mediocre, right? Age 24, he was made a general because a lot of the people had defected, left the country because of the revolution, etc. And he was outmanned 3-1, the Battle of Lodi in Italy, and he won a battle he should never have won. In his memoirs in St. Helena, he went to his tent, sat down, and wrote, "I am a superior being." He had an imprint that said, within 4 years, he was emperor of a nation he wasn't even a citizen of, barely spoke the language. That imprint, I have story after story, as you know, I relate to in the book about this, that it can make you, and I'm convinced our prisons are filled with people who bought into that failure imprint where some uncle said, "You're a loser.
Absolutely.
You're going to be a druggie. You're going to be a drink." Guess what? They live and prove and live to fulfill that internal image that they bought into.
I love the word that you use too. The people who are successful, they believe they are special.
I kept seeing that over and over.
Yeah.
Ayn Rand said that. She said, at age 9, I was special. I'm a special person. And Joseph Campbell was that way too.
And we're going to talk more about Joseph and Isadora Duncan and Tesla in the next segment, but we're going to take a break right now. But do stay tuned so that you can learn the rest of the 8 keys to greatness. And if you are just joining us, I'm Georgia Shakti-Hill, and our subject today is 8 Keys to Greatness. And Gene Landrum is the author of this book, plus so many others, but this book especially, you've brought it all together. And we left off, we had charisma, competitiveness, confidence, and self-esteem. We're going to hit drive, and that's a little bit like that passion, isn't it? The way people are driven.
Yeah, to some degree, except it's work ethic, it's polyphagia, it's keeping many balls in the air. I don't know if you...
Oh, yeah.
The successful people have many balls in the air at one time. Some of the novelists, like Stephen King, writes 3 novels at one time in his head, over and over. But mania, the example I like to use in my book is Thomas Edison.
Oh, yes.
At age 65, we know a lot about him because he kept a lab journal. Age 65, already wealthy, already had invented the light bulb, etc. He averaged for a whole year at age 65, 122 hours every week in the lab. Did he have to do? Now we moan and groan about 40.
Yeah, he was driven.
122 hours. Was he driven? I mean,
I accept drive.
They were driven.
Now, I mentioned Joseph Campbell because I love him. He was very powerful to me, and you said he was one of those that really caught this whole concept of the myth and how people have a hero and how they are kind of like more creative if they have someone to identify with.
Well, I have this, what I call a mythical hero mentor, a fantasy hero mentor. You know, Georgia, our limitations, where do you think they are? Our head and here. Very few limitations do we have. If we are just average, normal, a little bit above average, there is nothing we can't do. The limitations are that we don't think we can or don't have the heart to do it, right? Uh-huh. And if you identify what I have found, these great people, virtually every one of them were so into, let me use Frank Lloyd Wright as an example, and I've got 30 examples of this. Wright's mother looked down at him and said, "You're God." Now, I know you mothers tend to do that, but she wasn't kidding. She raised him to believe that he was the reincarnation of the mythical god Taliesin. Yes. She actually raised him to believe that he was God, and you know what? He believed he was outside of the bounds of normal behavior, that he could, the Guggenheim Museum, right. Falling water, everything he did, he believed he did not have to conform, which is one of my qualities.
Because he was the reincarnation of a god.
He had removed, he believed that he had been removed all any limitations. And Ted Turner believed he was Alexander the Great. I go on and on examples.
Well, and Isadora Duncan, she actually came to the belief that she was Aphrodite.
Aphrodite. She actually believed she was Aphrodite. She went to Greece in her early 20s as soon as she got any money and bought a mountain. And she actually was living her dream. And that's what we have to do, is live our dream, And guess what? You know, there are very few limitations if we go for it. It's amazing. I'm convinced.
The next quality we have is intuition.
Intuition, and you were enamored with Tesla. Tesla probably is one, he and Leonardo da Vinci, probably the two greatest human beings that maybe have ever lived. And I love Edison, but Edison couldn't carry Tesla's briefcase. I got to tell you, Tesla invented alternating current, the induction motor. I mean, all the power that drives our cities and our nation, he invented. You know, all the Westinghouse patents, you know, were his. And he did it all in his head. He didn't do experiments.
You said
he would
totally
invent
right-brained.
it, like Einstein. Einstein and he would both, who are great, you know, scientists, would invent it in their head and then go back and prove it. And, you know, it's one of the things I say, the world is not digital, it's analog. It's not quantitative, it's qualitative. And they got it. They knew it big time.
Now, they also have to have a bit of rebellion. That's one of those.
Oh, and Isadora Duncan was you know, she rebelled against everything and anything. And I use her in the book as an example of the rebellious renegade personality type. You got to get out of the box, Georgia. You know, there are no wins where everybody else is.
Now, she invented modern dance, or is the mother of modern dance.
Modern dance, and she hated ballet. And she decided to do her own thing. And you must do that if you're going to be great in any discipline. I don't care what it is. You've got to get out of that box. The box is where mediocrity exists.
Yes.
And greatness is that risky? You have to be out there on the edge, right? You got to, and you have to have great self-confidence to do that.
That's
right?
the next quality, risk-taking.
Risk-taking is probably, you know, people ask me, what is the one thing, Georgia? And I got to tell you, is that what I found pervasive, the 95 people who I've studied, some of the most eminent, greatest people who've ever lived, they were right on the edge. Right on the edge with that facility not to fall into the precipice, right? But they lived right on that edge. Because when you eliminate risk, if you mitigate risk, I tell mothers this all the time, lock your kid in the room, what? Kid's never going to get a bloody nose, never going to get scuffed knees, never have any problem, and never turn out to be anything. And everything is like that. In business, personally, professionally, you must find the greatest risk you can manage and go for it. And in fact, let me add to this. I do a lot of stuff on sports psychology, because I play a lot of tennis, etc. And they have now proven and showed, sports psychologists, that until you have greater than a 50% belief that you can hit a ball out of a sand trap, or you can hit a backhand down the line, you cannot do it. You have got to believe. Once you believe you can do it, you can do it. As long as you question that you can do it, you can't do it.
That's that mind-body connection. It also brings in a little bit of the spiritual aspect there, too, that universal mind, and you touch upon that with all of these, too.
Right. Yes, but I just can't tell you. I believe that risk and reward is a zero-sum game. I draw a chart in my book that as you take away risks, you take away all rewards.
Well, you even have a test at the end on
I do,
potential
on
to greatness. And
right.
I took the test. I scored very high. but the competitiveness, the risk-taking, and there was another area too. Oh, I don't like to work alone all the time. And that was one of the qualities that, but you ask them in so many different ways, and I thought, well, you know, you have to, I thought, maybe I'll concentrate then. But there is a price that you pay for the greatness, and that's one of the things I thought. Are they happy, though? And you cover that.
Yes, because people ask me, I make a lot of speeches, and people ask me, well, were they happy? Well, they thought they were. Dr. Seuss was kind of wonderful. He said, I am so miserable doing this, but if I weren't doing it, I'd be more miserable. And I guess Walt Disney is the prime example of that. Walt was doing what he loved. He was just a magnificent human being, but was he normal? Not even close. In fact, I tell people all the time, normality produces normal success. Abnormal success demands abnormality. Walt Disney had 8 nervous breakdowns, attempted suicide 3 times. He was obsessive compulsive. He was actually a little bit weirder than one of his friends, who was Howard Hughes, who we know is pretty weird, right? He's in the book. So they did not have a wonderful family life. And you can probably surmise why. And it's very difficult to have 2 masters. That's one of the things I found. Having 2 masters, very, very difficult. In fact, I got a quote in there. Margaret Thatcher's best friend said, Margaret's a magnificent woman, a brilliant politician, but she is a horrible mother, which I thought was really pretty insightful. Right?
For the best friend. Tenacity, you got to just keep on keeping on.
If you don't give up, you can't lose.
Yeah.
I am absolutely committed. These people were like that. They just never gave up. And I have a number of examples of that. And if you do, I guess James Michener. Are you aware that Michener was an orphan, obviously? At 9, he decided to become a great author. He went to school, got a degree in creative writing, still didn't become an author, quit work as a teacher at 30, and went back and got a master's degree in writing. At 40, still hadn't written. And then when he was 40, and he crashed and crawled out of the airplane in the South Pacific, and that, crisis in creativity is one of the things that I touch on.
Right.
That when you hit the bottom, it opens doors to the top. It's not what happens to us in life, it's how we deal with it. And he the next day he started writing South Pacific.
One of the
It's
things
unbelievable.
I thought was very fascinating too is that you said that most of the really great people stayed very healthy because it's a mental aspect of that, is the mind controls the body so much.
They pushed themselves, like I told you about Disney and Hughes, and these people would, days at a time, wouldn't even sleep. So they pushed their bodies, they should get sick, right? Napoleon once spent 4 days riding across, 4 horses died in a riot, mad dash across Europe. He never ate, he never bathed, he didn't sleep. But he never got sick. And I found that, I almost, at the end of the book, I think I said, they were too busy to get ill. They were too busy to die. It's unbelievable. I really believe that.
And it is that creative genius.
Yes,
That's
correct.
it. That is the creative genius. And personality, you said, and that's our last little thought, is that is such a powerful aspect of it, the personality.
Well, it's the personality, but if I could leave your viewers with one thing that Joseph Campbell, you're enamored with, and he is one of my heroes. I have read everything he's ever written. And you know what he said? And this is the essence of life, in my opinion. He said, follow your bliss.
Ah, that
Follow
is my
your
motto.
bliss is just do
Thank you,
what
Gene.
makes you feel good, and you will be great.
Follow your bliss. What could be better?
Right.
If you would like to be in touch with Gene Landrum, and also we always love to hear with you, stay tuned. We'll let you know how. And we have some parting thoughts. Eight keys to greatness, how you can unlock your hidden potential. And that is living in balance in mind, body, spirit. Until next time, I'm Georgia Shakti-Hill. May you be well, happy, and peaceful, and will you have a successful experience.